Welcome to Life Change Solutions, a podcast for hope, health, and happiness as we go through change. I'm your host, Kendra Crompton, and today I have a very special guest with me. I've known him since he was a baby. This is my son, Tommy Crompton. Well, I'm sure he prefers to be called Tom, but because I'm his mom, we're calling him Tommy today. And a little bit about him. One thing that I will say is he has been a great support for me, even when he was a child, but even more so as he's gotten older. So an example of that is I remember right now we're at the holiday season. So you've heard this voice on another podcast. You can credit the voice to him. We are crediting him with giving us this cold, per se. So if I sound raspy, or if you think it's sexy, or if you think it just sounds like a cold, it's his fault. Anyway.
Accusation without proof.
Anyway, he has, since he was a young boy, been the joy of my life, of course. He was my firstborn, and I remember having him and holding him in my arms. He does not remember this. And just being amazed at the perfect little fingers, the perfect little toes. And it was such this overwhelming feeling of love. Like, I would give my life for this baby. I love this baby so much. And then all of a sudden, I had this overwhelming feeling of inadequacy. Like, oh my, I have to teach him everything he needs to know. How am I going to do that? And I literally was like so concerned and had this anxiety. I don't know how I'm going to teach him everything he has to know. And I remember praying, God, you got to help me out here. And just this feeling came over me that, hey, I got your back. Whatever you don't do, I'm going to cover you. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. And I will say God's done a lot of covering because I have a lot of weaknesses. And I remember praying several times as I was raising my kids, oh, God, please overcome, help me, this weakness, you got to make up for this. And the kids all turned out great. And I think that has a lot to do with some extra divine help in raising them. So I'm going to ask him to tell a little bit about himself and his memories and some of the changes that he's gone through and perhaps the changes in our relationship. And I may bring up some stuff in between. But I'm going to turn some time over to him and let him talk about himself and our relationship. How's that changed over the years?
How has our relationship changed over the years?
First, tell a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, I mean, where to start? Start from when I was born.
Well, I don't think you remember that, but let me give you some questions. Are there specific times in your life that you remember were really difficult changes? Because we did travel quite a bit. Especially you were more affected than the others. In fact, on one of our podcasts, Kalina said, one thing is I kind of felt sorry for Tommy because when we moved to Virginia, he was in 8th grade and that's a tough year. And so, through those changes, for example, the first change when you were just 3, we moved to Monterey. Mm-hmm. And then we moved to Italy. And then we, those moves, how do you think that affected you?
So, I talked to a lot of other people and kind of compare how I was raised versus them. And I mean, I think I did the math once and it was something like before we'd settled down in Virginia, we'd moved 11 times or something like that.
Yeah, about that.
And, I know a lot of people do kind of say the same thing, like, oh, that must have been really tough. Like, I feel real sorry for you. Like, you never really settled down. And honestly, I never felt that way growing up. I'm not sure if it's because we just had a really close family dynamic that, it really didn't matter where we went. or maybe it was that no matter where we went, there was a LDS kind of support structure there that made it a lot easier to acclimate to the area. I think those are both two big factors, but I never viewed it as a detriment to my childhood growth. I loved moving around. I think, I mean, besides Virginia, Florida was probably the place we stayed the longest. So it was, what was it? It was Monterey, California, Italy, where Kalina was born.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. We were in Italy for about 2.5 years, right? Yeah. So I remember that place fairly well. I remember like the Catholic nun school I went to.
Filipino nun schools.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I didn't speak much Italian back then, but I remember I understood what the nun was saying, and she said something like, "Who wants the meter stick?" And I remember thinking like, "Oh, I want that meter stick." Because I can't remember how old I was, 5 or 6, but I don't know. All you want to do is play with swords as the lightsabers kids. I raised my hand super high. I was like, "I want the stick," and boy, she gave it to me.
Explain what that was.
Oh, she smacked me in the hands, the butt. It was.
Yeah, that's not acceptable in the United States.
Oh boy, but. Yeah, besides Italy, Florida was where I probably made the most friends. Mm-hmm. And then we moved, how old was I? 11 or 12?
Yeah, 11 or 12. Yeah.
And we moved to England. And I do remember that being somewhat of a hard transition because we moved from Florida. We were in
New York
for a bit. This was around the same time 9/11 happened.
Exactly.
So we didn't fly over. So there was that one year I remember being somewhat tough, not for the move necessarily, but because that was like, going into junior high school. Right. That was the first time I started getting picked on by kids. And, moving into when we were in England, I don't remember anything bad happening in New York. I do remember getting made fun of for being overweight at the time. And I'm sure you remember that as well. Like, that was like the first time I'd been made fun of for my weight. And then when we moved to England, we were on a military base going to a military school, and the kids had their own little social structure set up that, when a new kid moves in, I don't know what the power dynamic is, but they have to like assert their dominancy. And I remember being like, man, why is this kid making fun of how I say the word S? I don't know if you remember that. Remember there's some kid, he made all the kids make fun of me because I have slithery S's or something like that. Yeah. Brutal. Like, I don't even know
I did not know this.
I don't know how kids make.
How did I not know this?
I think you might have forgot, but it was
maybe.
It was definitely something they made fun of me for. And, I mean, to give credit where credit's due, junior high school kids are creative and brutal. But
yeah, they can be brutal.
After that, we moved to Virginia, and I remember the first couple weeks or months we were there. Like, I watched Saturday morning cartoons on a box in the basement because we didn't have furniture.
Yeah, it took a while to get the furniture.
I mean, me and the girls would just take turns sitting on the box watching whatever, I think I watched Pokemon in the morning, and then, later on they would watch what they wanted to.
Sailor Moon.
Yeah, something like that. But
Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, that was big back then. And I think moving to junior high there, I made friends and I don't know. I think that was sticking through high school in the same area was nice, but looking back on it, I don't feel like it was a detriment. It was just you move to a new place, you learn about the people around you, and you just kind of find common ground and make friends. I don't feel like it, I never viewed it as poor me, I wish we'd grown up in the same area. On the other hand, like, I've met people who lived in the same town their entire life and had the same friends for their whole life.
Yeah.
And I've actually kind of felt sorry for them because what ends up happening is, they go off to college, they lose their best friends. And, besides maybe some college roommates, it seems like later on they have trouble making new friends.
Yeah. I would say that's true, that all of you had to learn to adapt and make friends wherever you've gone. And you were able to do that very well, which was different than I talk about this in my podcast about me, that when I went to college, it was really hard for me. I didn't have that ability as much. And because y'all moved around so much, college, I don't think was as hard an experience for you all as it was for me. And it was a big culture shock for me, where you had been to so many different cultures that, and even though it was in the United States, I'm going to say Utah was a big culture shock for me. So, but you didn't have that because you had already been to so many different cultures. So one of the things I think that did for you was help you be open and accepting of many different diverse people. Like there was no, I remember that you had there was color blindness. There was nothing that you thought was weird or different. It was just like, oh, that's them. That's who they are. And I think that came from being in so many different places. So if I'm going to bring up some memories, okay? We're going to go down memory lane. So in these moves, a lot of times I had to travel with you guys alone. And when we lived in Florida, I felt like your dad was out to sea. I felt like it was really important during the holidays, and we're in the holidays now, so this is kind of apropos. But I felt it was really important that you see both sets of grandparents. So we drove from Jacksonville down to Miami, and I was sick, but way sicker than this. I was feeling horrible. And then we had to get on a plane up to New York. And many of you may relate to this if you've gone through the delays or your planes were canceled this holiday season, but our plane was delayed. And I sat there and I was like, oh, I'm so tired and so sick. Okay, fine. And then it was delayed again. And I swear, I was so dejected, I was going to cry. And you had to be around 11 or 12 at the time because it was Jacksonville. And I remember you coming, putting your arm around me and saying, Mom, it's going to be okay. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a wonderful boy. And to be so aware of how I was, because a lot of times kids, they're not aware. And to be aware and to be there for me and just, put your arm around me. And I found that is something that you were born with, like, something that caring kind of looking out for people. And I've seen that with, as you have interacted with friends and you kind of have found those friends that needed a friend and have been there for them. I remember especially when we moved to Virginia, there was one girl in our congregation and you just picked up and became her friend. So that is one of the skills that I don't know if you were innately born with. I don't know how you got it, but it is something I really admire. And throughout my life, I've seen those different types of things happen. I remember one time I was going through a really challenging time and you said, Mom, don't worry, I'm here to support you. And I thought, wow, who says that to their mom? It was awesome. So do you remember those times? You're probably not, right?
No, I don't remember that. I don't think it's anything I was particularly born with. Like, I don't think it was a, special ability to be able to like empathize with people. I think that's just how we were raised. Mm-hmm. I don't attribute anything to, my innate ability or anything, but
yeah. That's a really controversial subject. When I was in my, my master's degree is, are we born with certain traits or are they, brought in because of our environment? Is it epigenetics? And I really think that there are traits you are born with and your epigenetics, your environment definitely is going to have an effect on you too. But there's definitely certain personality traits that people are born with.
I mean, I think that very early on in my growth, one of the biggest, I don't know how I would call it, like influencing factors was just how I interacted with other kids, for better or for worse. When I was younger, whether it was getting like feeling what it feels like to be teased, being the new kid in a new situation, or feeling like the odd one out, but still having a support system back home. Or, I feel like those experiences help you empathize because you've been there now. And I mean, even when we were in Virginia, and I remember like my friend had told this girl that I had a crush on, that I liked her. And she came to me and she was like, "Oh, I don't really like you because you're fat." I was 13 maybe. And I mean, as embarrassing as that was, I remember there was one night we'd finished dinner and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for a run. It was like the first time. I remember you looked at me as I was like, "Okay, Mom, I'm going to go for a run." And you just looked at me like, okay. And I put on just whatever the sweats I had at the time were, and I tried to run around our little mile block, and I'm pretty sure it took me 20 minutes, which is like walking speed. But I remember like jogging, and just, it was pitch black. And that was why I went out at night, because I didn't want people to see me. But, that was a point in my life where it was like, you know what, I can take control. And I started running from then on, and kind of, fitness has been a big part of my life since then. And, after that.
And not only did you run, you were in cross country.
Yeah. I ended up becoming varsity cross country. I did varsity lacrosse. I did varsity crew.
Yeah.
And throughout all of that, I don't know. I remember when I first came back the next year, having lost all the weight and kind of, I don't know what to call it, but like a glow up, I guess is what they call it nowadays.
Oh, I haven't heard this term, but okay.
She came up to me. She was like, "Wow, Tommy, you look great." And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I don't want anything to do with her.
Yeah.
So I at a very early age became disillusioned with things that were kind of superficial, or building like a real connection with someone, and whether it's friends, relationships, or family, like being able to be vulnerable and honest, even if it's something you don't want to hear, I know was very important. Like after I've talked to this to a couple other people, but after, you and Dad got divorced, one of the things that I took a real concerted effort to do was to call the girls every day. And I can't remember if Kalina was just getting out of college or where they were, but I remember thinking to myself, like, at the very least, there needs to be a open channel of communication between all of us where they feel like they can tell me anything. And in order to do that, I have to be willing to tell them anything.
Yeah.
And I think that relationship between us is strong and visible now. I mean, the relationship I have with the girls is pretty, brutally honest sometimes, but
well, Kalina, in her when she was on the podcast, she talks about how you always wanted to hug her, and she just hated, we talked a little bit about the refrigerator scene and how we had to have a truce, and she had to give permission, and she had to give you one hug. You got one hug a day. And it was funny because I do think that that's one thing. You have always been a very physical person, and she's not at all.
Right.
And so that's one of the things where I think, oh yeah, they were born with different traits. It's just who they are.
Yeah.
And she wasn't really a cuddly baby per se.
She changed when she came back from Ecuador, but
yeah, she did. She does give hugs now.
As much as I'd like to say, oh yeah, that was me trying to, build a relationship with my little sister, I think I was just being a troll.
You're just being annoying. You're annoying.
I think I was just being annoying. But yeah.
Well, one of the things that you brought to our family is fun. And you could find, no matter what, it was kind of, your personality is that, you know what, I'm not going to work so hard that I can have fun. And I remember very clearly how in the 6th grade, you got a packet to do. Do you remember this? You got a packet to do, and you had to color the front. Mm-hmm. And you said, "I'm not coloring the front." I said, "Well, that's 10 points. If you don't color, you're going to get 10 points off." And you said, "That is just way too much time, and Not only that, coloring is for first graders. I'm in 6th grade. And I was like, okay, you don't care if you get 10 points off? You're like, nope, it's the principal. I shouldn't have to be coloring in 6th grade. And you're like, I have more things to do that are fun that I want to do. And so what do I say to that as a mom? And I was just like, okay, well, the consequences is going to be you're going to have a lower grade. And you were just like, there are priorities. And I've seen you in your life. There are priorities. Even today, you had work and you're like, hey, it's a sunny day. For lunch, I'm going to go for a swim because I don't want to go when the sun goes down. And finding that balance, and you were very well-rounded. So you played the guitar, you spoke 2 different languages, not only took one language, Latin, then you took Japanese, and you just found time to do those interests that you really liked, reading and sports and going out with your friends, and definitely gaming. I remember having like 6 or 7 guys with all their games and screens up in the basement playing. So you were able to find that. And I feel like that's carried over in your life now. Is that true?
I mean, there've been periods of life where I probably, dive into work too much, but those don't last very long. And I mean, I think I'm trying to think of maybe a good example of this. I mean, if there's a meeting coming up or something important for work, like, yeah, I'll reshift time and dedicate it towards that. But I mean, it's funny. I don't remember that story of me in 6th grade, but oddly enough, that does sound like something I would say.
Yes.
But,
even when you were in college, it was like, okay, this is good enough. I'm going to go out shooting with my friends. I'm going to, you found that time. There was that balance. Right. We talk about self-care, and you always seem to find that for yourself, working out, whatever it was. You seem to be able to find that balance. Unlike my other podcaster daughter.
Well, I mean, finding the balance hasn't really been that hard. And maybe it's because of my ADD or just priorities in life. My first year of college, I do remember I got terrible grades because I didn't know how to study. I don't remember studying at home a day in high school.
I don't remember you either. I remember.
I look back on it and I'm like, how did I get through high school and get into college?
So one of the things that I noticed is that you could read something and you remembered. Like you pretty much remembered what you read. Selective memory, but yeah. And so if that's how you were in school, you could read the stuff and go in and take the test. You didn't have to study. Unlike me and other members of our family, I had to write notes. I had to highlight. I had to rewrite. And well, and I think that was the difference when I got to college was the volume of work that you're expected to do. Because I remember in high school, I did take one, like they had just rolled out the AP courses. It's much more common nowadays that kids take AP credits, but back then it was pretty rare. Like we're talking early 2000s to mid 2000s. Well, I think they had them. It just wasn't your priority. Well, no, they had them, but I remember at most people would take 2. Yeah. I've never heard I don't know. I took AP history or AP American history. And I remember it was just so much work and the tests were so hard. I remember thinking, why am I doing this for college credit? Like whatever, I'll do it when I get to college. So then the next year I didn't do it. Not that that's the right decision. I feel like nowadays you have to do it to be competitive, but right. I might have been an influence on that because I'm not a big believer in this because all it does is take away your electives basically, unless you get a certain grade on that test. Yeah. And so, you get credit, but so I'm more of why do you want to do more work? And so, which maybe that was my influence because I'm of the mindset, you know what? This is good enough and I'm going to get in if I get all A's. So, I mean, going on a mission to Japan,
really changed how I viewed studying, because there was a need and a priority to learn the language, learn how to talk to other people, and learn how to appreciate, culture and relate to other people. So when I came back from Japan, my first semester back was straight A's. And my second semester, I'm pretty sure I got straight A's too. But I switched my major in my junior year to international relations. And
what was it before?
It was animation. It was drawing. Because that's what it was easy. That's what I was good at. And so I thought, I'll be an animator. But a common saying that people say is, find something you like to do and you'll never work a day in your life. For me, it was the opposite. Something that I liked to do became work.
Yeah.
And then I stopped liking it.
Yeah, that happened to me.
And I didn't want that to happen, so I switched. And I had to take a lot of credits, and it was a lot of stress. There was one semester in particular where I tried to cheat out and just copy paste some summaries for books for things. And I got a 0 on it, obviously, because they found out I was plagiarizing. And this class only had 3 assignments, and I remember just being devastated. So the idea of I'm not going to color inside the lines because it's not what I need to do, that mindset may have not always helped me, because this was the same thing. Why do I have to write summaries of 10 books when I have these other assignments I need to do? This is so dumb. And
yeah,
I paid for it, but lessons learned. That being said, in my graduate degree, it took me, I started in 2016, and there was a 3 years of active duty that I didn't do it, but it took me 4 years to get my master's degree. But that's because I balanced it. I only took 1 class, maybe 2 for a semester or 2. And then that was a lot of work.
While working full time.
And, there are a couple things that powered that decision. One was that I didn't want to go into any more school debt. And I was doing a master's program that was kind of related to my work. So to me, it seemed beneficial to learn while still gaining work experience, because then whenever a paper came up, I could actually pick a topic related to my job and become more proficient at my job while fulfilling a school credit.
Nice.
So, through mistakes in grad school and in life, in undergrad and then in life, in work, you kind of figure out where that balance should be. And when I first got married, and as you know, I'm divorced now, but when I first got married I didn't feel like there was any trouble striking a balance between spending time with, my now ex-wife and working. Looking back on it, I could have done better, but I think everyone can say that, when you're young and you're just starting and trying to pay the bills, that's kind of what your priority is. But even when I had joined the Army and I was going through, a bunch of schools, and I was gone for 2 months at a time, 3 to 6 weeks or whatever. When I was back, I did my best to be there. And I think that might have been, I can't speak for my ex-wife, but I think she probably struggled with striking that balance a lot of the time. And she's, kind of the opposite of me. She grew up in the same place her entire life, had the same 3 friends, went to the same schools, and kind of had a little bit more control over her life growing up. Whereas, I had no control over where we moved.
Right.
I had no control over. So, even as a kid, you start learning those lessons of what's in your control and what's not.
What you can do and what you can't. That's a great thing to learn.
What we eat was not under my control. We ate there was no opportunity to be a picky eater.
No. I know people say to me, my kid will only eat white bread and stuff. I said, well, mine never got it. So they got to eat what they got. Yeah. They get cucumbers and carrots and grapes and cheese.
I think the only things I didn't like growing up were maybe applesauce and then pulpy orange juice.
Yeah.
But, those are kind of insignificant, but figuring out what is in your control and what's not, you'd think it would be easier for people. But now that when I'm going to be 34 here now, I've met so many people that struggle with being able to just accept what's out of their control.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've felt that before. There've been things that happen in life where you're devastated because it didn't go the way you wanted, and you're just down and sad, and you wish things would be different, and you're just looking for things to do. And it's frustrating because in your heart of hearts, there's nothing you could have done, whether it's not getting into the school you wanted, not getting the job offer you wanted. There's this really good book that I had actually kind of stumbled across, and I saw it on your desk when I was looking for your book earlier, Mindset by Carol Dweck. Mm-hmm. It was actually recommended to me by a guy in the Ranger Regiment, 75th Ranger Regiment, after I had finished airborne school. And I tried really hard to get the honor grad for this, and I ended up not getting it. And I was just devastated. And he gave me this book, and he said, "Hey, you should read this." And it came at just such a fortuitous time in my life that the impact, I think, was magnified, because there have been people I've recommended it to, and it just kind of went over their head. Yeah. And now I've realized it's just because they, it wasn't their time in life. It is a great
book. I just did a podcast on books that I recommend. I do have that book. I listened to that one on Audible with having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Right.
And definitely there's some good validity to that. So and you take after your mom and wanting to read all that.
I mean, I enjoy self-help books, especially on Audible.
Yeah, but have you read mine?
Is it on Audible?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And I am the one who's speaking.
Well, I have 5 credits now, so I'll get it.
Okay.
I've been behind. But
can't believe my own kids have not read my book.
You know what though? That's not uncommon. I've seen like actors talk about how their kids don't watch their parents' movies, and I think, I'll totally admit that I'm guilty of whatever that phenomena is, where it's just kids will never.
I don't know. I'm just really glad that you're here, because there was one of my daughters who said, "No, I don't want to be on your podcast," and you said, "Yeah, I'll be on it." I was like, "Oh, good," because one of the things that's fun is to have a little bit of fun with your son or fun with your daughter, and let people see, kind of the relationships, how we work, how things go, and they can then maybe learn from that and take that as how to grow. You've said a lot of really good things that I've so appreciated. One is the mindset, and I talk a lot about mindset in my podcast.
Yeah, that when I read that book, or when I listened to it, I just remember there was this aha moment where I said, "Oh, I was raised in everyone to a degree is raised in a fixed mindset, but this growth mindset explains so much of how I'd gotten to the point where I was, because I've had a lot of failure in my life." And that was, for any of you that haven't read, Mindset, 100% recommend it. But the key premise is that those with a fixed mindset view all of their qualities as an inherent part of them. She gives the example of kids who were given a puzzle of a certain level of difficulty, and once they finished it, the kids were all praised, saying, "Oh, you finished this puzzle, you must be very smart." And then the kids were presented with 2 options. They could either receive a puzzle of the same difficulty or get a harder puzzle. Kids with a fixed mindset chose the puzzle with the same level of difficulty, because in their minds, solving that puzzle meant they were smart. And if they couldn't solve the next one, it threatened their personal idea of whether or not they were smart. And I've seen a lot of people who were like this. They love getting A's in school because that validates them as being smart, or, they need some kind of outward validation for who they are. And if they don't succeed in something, they stop doing it because it threatens their internal image of whether or not they are, good at it. Yeah. Whereas kids who chose the harder puzzle said, "Well, of course I'm going to do something harder," because failure or not being able to do something was not necessarily a reflection of them as a person. It just meant, couldn't do it. And I've found that to be like, I knew it in my heart, but hearing it verbalized and then reading it was just this moment of clarity and epiphany that I had that, ever since then, I've kind of held as a mantra, because in my life before that moment, I have failed at a lot of things, whether it be a paper or a class or a job offer I didn't get, or, maybe a really hard program I tried to get into. And even though I gave it my all, I just wouldn't get accepted or I wouldn't pass. And, you'd get really down. But now that I look back on it, those moments, I just rallied and moved on to something else.
So that's one of the things I talk about in my book, is that we need those failures. We need those hard times, those things that really strike us in order to grow, in order to become who we need to become. And then those hard times then also help us appreciate the happy times.
Yeah.
So I have to bring up another the thing when you were a kid that brought me happiness and joy. So you were very musical. And I remember I was sitting in the car driving you, because I was driving all the time, 4 kids everywhere. And you started singing a cat song. Meow, 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 meow.
Oh,
meow,
gosh.
meow, meow.
No.
And then the other kids started joining in, and you were harmonizing. This was in Virginia Beach, and you were I don't even know, you were like in 4th grade, and all of you were harmonizing this cat meow, 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 meow. And to this day, I was like, how did they do that? It's one of these things I think is something genetic.
It's television.
Was it? No, I do think it's genetic, because I cannot carry a tune
Watch
like that.
as much TV as you can, kids. That's how you learn to be musical.
I don't think it is so. I do think, and you continue to be musical. And I remember you taught yourself to play the bass guitar, or you had a girl teach you, because they needed a bassist in good ensemble, in the jazz ensemble. And it was something you're like, oh, well, I'll learn how to do it. And it was like, you're what? You're going to play a bass? Not this big, huge bass in my basement for years after. I'm like, we got to get rid of this. But so I do think that you kind of have had that. It's like, oh, well, I'll just try and learn it. I maybe succeed, may not, but
I got through a lot of things in life faking it till I made it. Like even the story you're telling now, there was, to get in there, my high school had a jazz guitar combo, and you had to try out. And then, I don't know how many people tried out, but people got rejected. And I wanted to be part of the jazz ensemble, but I didn't, I knew I wasn't good enough to do it, the normal guitar, because there were guys that were amazing. But I was like, I can learn bass. So just like you're saying, I can learn it. And literally all I did was, as much as I could, listen to the music, because we had little CDs, and I would just play it. I don't even think I read the sheet music. So that when I tried out, all I was doing was just playing what I'd listened to. And they were like, wow, it's really good. But the minute my guitar teacher, Mr. Owens, was like, all right, ready, freestyle, go, I didn't know how to do anything. I could not like come up with something for the life of me. I got better at it towards the end once I figured out scales and stuff. But yeah, that was definitely a fake it till you make it type of deal. But
I had not heard the background. I just remember you said, hey, I'm going to take some lessons from this girl from school so I can be in the jazz ensemble.
She was really good. She was like an orchestra bass player, and then also a talented electric bass player. So, yeah, I think she ended up going on to do music professionally.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I have loved our conversation. There's so many good points. I don't even know what to stress, but I think it is, if you fail, try again, or don't take failure personally. That it's maybe move on to the next thing.
I would say the takeaway is that, my childhood growing up, you did a good job not coddling us and giving us opportunities to succeed and fail and grow. And I think, I don't know if you did that intentionally or if it was just an inherent part of who you are, of, being raised in the family you were raised in. It's just like, hey, kids need to have a certain degree of freedom to, have fun, explore, trip, fall, fail, which I think is more uncommon nowadays. I don't want to sound like that guy who's like, back in my day, we had to walk uphill, snow both ways. But, I have seen a certain degree of coddling and protection for kids nowadays that prevents them from, handling hardships well.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of anxiety. In fact, I did have a podcast on teenagers, a lot of anxiety. And I think you hit the head on the nail, is that you have to have some failure and know that it's okay. And you're going to get through it, even if it doesn't turn out the way you expected. And you can do that with hope, health, and happiness. You can still find joy in the journey.
I mean, for the good and the bad of the Army, that's one of the things they do, or at least they did. I don't know if they still do it anymore with how much softer they are, but they purposely make you fail in order to reinforce that kind of feeling of like, hey, you need to keep pressing on even in the midst of insurmountable odds. Mm-hmm. Sorry, my alarm was going off.
Yeah. And that's life.
Yeah.
That is life. That's about what my book is about, is, you know what? You can sit back and it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel your feelings, but ultimately you then got to move on and go on, and life doesn't stop, and we can't keep looking back. We got to move on.
In my life, the only times where I have felt a lack of hope, health, or happiness is when I have staked my entire life in my mind, when I have associated my entire future on something, whether it be a job, a relationship, or something like that. And then what I found afterwards, when they've fallen through, is that, oh, there's more to life than this. I have a family. I have, when you step back and you realize all the things you talk about, where, what is it you can be grateful for? What is it that is under your control? What can help you bring happiness out, within yourself? Then things come into perspective more. So when you lose that perspective, that is when you stop having it. And I mean,
oh my gosh, you're so awesome. You should have your own podcast. I'm serious. You really should. One of the reasons I have this podcast is because of you. So one day you had called me up and asked for some advice, and you said, Mom, you should have a podcast. And I thought, okay, here's my biggest critic. And he says, I should have a podcast. I'm like, okay, I'll do it then. Because I'd had other people say it, and I'd thought about it a couple of years ago, and I thought, I'd kind of like to, but I don't know, I just can't do it. And then when you kind of gave me that boost, Mom, you should have a podcast. And I was like, okay. So thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
Now you can have one.
Oh, no, thanks.
Never know.
But yeah, so, I know that, just to close up that whole point about, being raised with the appropriate amount of hardship and chances to grow, I know that there's a lot of talk of, kids nowadays, and I've seen it, where I'm at right now. I'm helping with the young men and their activities and stuff like that. And there's a visible difference in how they behave and how they socially interact. And I don't know if it's because of COVID,
I think that
quarantine, isolation, or maybe, social media and just how they've learned social, because maybe all of the above.
I think so. I think it is.
But it's different. And I don't know if there's I don't think there's a way to go back. I think we just have to learn how to adapt and still, when I have kids, when I have kids, I've sat down and thought about, what am I going to do? Like the things that we have nowadays, social media, technology, that's not going away. So how am I going to raise them and give them those opportunities to develop into what I think are well-rounded individuals? And I've had to, I've had some inspiration, but that's a long.
Well, I have a podcast on that, and she talks about social media, and she talks about helps parents to navigate that with their kids. So yes, there is a need. You are spot on. I'm glad that you are giving back to the kids in where you live, those young men, because they have truly a good inspiration, someone who can maybe help them with some of these harder things that they haven't been able to, especially with the pandemic and not being able to have those social skills, and especially with the social media, we're finding is a huge detriment to how they communicate in person with people. Well, I want to thank you for being on my podcast. This has been awesome. You have such great insight, really, really good insight. You have since you were a little kid, and I'm so happy that you are here. Even though you gave me this cold, I'm very happy that you're here and that you were willing to come onto the podcast. It means a lot to me, and I think to our listeners. You've really shared some great things, so thank you very much for coming on.
None of it's my insight. It's insight I learned from you and others.
Oh yeah, so. Thanks. Okay, yes, I'll make your favorite dinner tonight.
Yes.
No, we're gonna go out to dinner, but I want to thank all of my listeners and followers and subscribers on YouTube. I love when you have comments, so please, if you like this podcast, give it a 5-star review and comment on this very handsome young man here, and let me know what you think. And know that you can find me in the notes below. You can find me on my Facebook page, Life Change Solutions. You can find me also on my website, Life Change Solutions, as well as Instagram and on YouTube and on and any podcast that you listen to. This should be on, but and you can always email me. I will take your comments, and seriously, I will find people who, if I don't know the answer, I'll find professionals who can help and guide us through the changes that we're going through with hope, health, and happiness. And this has been a podcast of Life Change Solutions.